us, though, was, I think you were coming on campus for some interviews. Were you received it? And security put out this notice, and the only picture they had of him was from that era. So they circulated this picture, not the Nova, because they tried to put out this picture that circulated.
Actually, classic IRC, now that I know that now. But
It looked like you had done it.
it was just,
They're trying to make sure.
so we tried to, yeah,
I thought it was behind you, but it just,
We didn't give them that way. There was a would have been a way to do that. An angle.
so glad no one organized that.
Get your glasses.
my favorite hearing photo. We got the hearing.
Well,
And I'm standing sideways. It looks like some belly is resting on his shoulder. I'm like, it looks like. I need some help. It was on the front. It was on.
A lot of support for
It was on the front page of the website. Patty was working, running over. Oh my god! Oh my god! Open the website.
It's a dynamic environment. Watch that. Yeah. Yeah, it's your subject.
Oh, excuse me?
Sorry.
I'm gonna find out yourself.
Yeah.
Well, they're like the kids' chairs too.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
You sit and so forth. Thank you, Gene. We've counseled Gene Dacus on his boxing, late night boxing. A decent bar tonight.
He lives down there at the waterfront. They got some longshoremen down there.
You got the dolls okay yesterday?
Yeah. In fact, it was starting to clear. The ridiculous thing was, I left the office without my wallet. Got home and they were going out of the office. So I called back. Yeah, so I let my wife drive out there. I took the risk driving back. I'll call Tammy and let her know.
How you doing, sir? Good to see you.
Oh, they're not sending anything.
I think she's sort of committed to she also comes up on her own leave, and then they set her leave for that. So like, why not? Take advantage of it. Yeah.
I'd rather share that microphone with Ostendorff, or we can, I guess whichever you in the moment, we'll just. I guess you're right-handed, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the better one.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning, sir. Kristine Svinicki.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Steve Burns.
Nice to see you. Monsieur Bill Austin. Hi, nice to see you. Bill, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
Good morning.
Hey, how you doing, Chairman? Good.
Thank you so much for coming again. Great. Good morning. Good to see you. Thank you so very much.
Good to see you, Ms. Cantor. How are you?
Very well. Good morning.
That's a good idea.
That's the only contact with my dog anymore. Hearing will come to order. I'd like to thank all of the subcommittees again for their hard work on the fiscal year 2016 omnibus bill, and I look forward to working with you during this busy year ahead. We just had an organizational meeting. Things are moving relatively rapidly since the President's budget came out yesterday. That we are trying to get all our hearings in and try to move things up and go through regular order and get individual bills done, which would be novel. We haven't passed all of the individual appropriation bills and done conference reports and passed those since 1994. Be nice to actually get things done on time. There's a lot of things in this world that I'm uncertain about, but I'm like 85% sure of when October 1st comes. So you'd think we could get it done, but it's going to be a difficult year and a more rapid year because we're obviously gone in August, and we have a couple weeks where we're going to be out because of the president or the party conventions in July. So I appreciate you all being willing to come. First thing, I don't know if this is the first hearing in any of the subcommittees or not, but it's one of the first. Although we just received the President's budget yesterday, we begin our oversight hearings today. The Appropriations Committee wants to move all 12 bills under regular order within the caps that are currently set in law and finish our work on time. We will need to maintain an aggressive schedule in order to conduct the thorough oversight that is needed to ensure that the fiscal year 2017 Energy and Water Appropriation Bill provides responsible funding to the programs within its jurisdictions. Today's hearing is on the budget of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We have before us, Stephen, did I say that correctly? While I am confident that had the NRC received a lower appropriation, you, the commissioners, would not have actually voted to adopt reductions that could reductions that could risk safety and health before a more thorough review of lower priority activities was conducted. It was still disappointing to see a letter that suggested that you would. That having been said, since then the NRC has taken important first steps toward right-sizing. I congratulate you and I look forward to further discussions on continuing these promising efforts. The Commission plays an important role in ensuring that our nation can count on the clean and reliable energy that our nuclear power plants provide. The NRC must continue to assure the protection of public health and safety and provide a timely and predictable licensing process for the nuclear industry. In addition, we must move forward on long-term waste storage, and the Commission must be prepared to advance new and innovative nuclear technologies. I look forward to your thoughts on all of these issues. I would also ask the witnesses to please ensure that the hearing record, questions for the record, and any supporting information requested by the subcommittee are delivered in final form to us no later than 4 weeks from the time you receive them. Members who have additional questions for the record will have until the close of business tomorrow to provide them to the subcommittee office. With that, I'd like to welcome our ranking member, Ms. Capter, to our first hearing of the new budget season, and yield her any time that she may use for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much, and good morning, Chairman Burns and Commissioners Svinicki, Ostendorff, and Baran. We're very happy to have you here today to talk about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and thank you for the work that you do. Nuclear energy is a critical component of our nation's energy mix, and is a source of electricity which does not contribute to climate change. It will be particularly important as we strive to meet the targets of the Clean Power Plan and to deliver on the commitments made to reduce our carbon emissions at COP21 in Paris. As part of meeting these targets, we currently rely on an aging fleet of nuclear power generation facilities with an average age of 35 years. Many have already outlived their initial 40-year licenses, while others are quickly approaching it. At the forefront of my mind with regards to aging nuclear plants is First Energy's Davis-Besse plant in my own district, which in December of last year received a 20-year extension of its license. These plants provide good, stable, and high-paying jobs in addition to reliable and cost-effective electricity. So in regards to this, I'm happy to see Davis-Besse's license extended. However, the bulk of our nuclear fleet is passing through this relicensing process, and I look forward to hearing about the steps you're taking at the NRC to ensure that communities in areas surrounding these plants are safe, especially as 1 in 3 Americans' lives lie within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. Last year, at this hearing, there was a great deal of discussion on the right sizing and rebaselining of the NRC's budget. And I understand that the report detailing that effort is scheduled to be completed in the next couple of months, and I hope you'll be able to comment on the progress that you have made to that end as well, and the impacts of your findings on the NRC's budget. Finally, I'd like to close by noting the fact that yet another year has passed, and we do not seem to be any closer to resolving how, and even more controversially where, to dispose of our nuclear waste. The current approach of maintaining high-level radioactive waste on site at dozens of plants distributed throughout our country is far from ideal, and in the absence of a real forward motion at Yucca Mountain or another site, our nation has no long-term solution to this pressing problem. In fact, I was asked by someone in the press yesterday about this very issue. In addition to $10 billion we have already spent on Yucca, the Department of Energy estimates that we have $27 billion of liabilities deriving from our failure to meet our legal obligation to dispose of this waste. Interim storage may serve as a step in the right direction, but we truly require a permanent strategy. The government must live up to its responsibilities to our nation and provide for the eventual safe disposal of commercially spent fuel that is currently stored at these sites. I look forward to your thoughts on how we can meet this obligation, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding me this time.
Thank you. Chairman Burns, you're going to give the opening statement, and others will have a few minutes if you wish to comment on an opening statement. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Capter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's fiscal year 2017 budget request. As you know, the NRC is an independent agency established to license and regulate the civilian use of radioactive materials in the United States. And the resources we are requesting in fiscal 17 will allow the NRC to continue to uphold our important safety and security mission. Our proposed budget is $970.2 million, and which includes 3,462 full-time equivalent staff, and the Office of the Inspector General an additional $12.1 million. Over our base budget, this represents a decrease of about 20 million and 90 FTE from the fiscal year 2016 enacted budget. For further context, our request is 74 million and 280 FTE less than our fiscal 2014 enacted budget. And the fiscal 17 budget request reflects our continued focus on our important mission, while it also achieves resource savings and improves our efficiency. As we continue to work through the Project AIM initiative, we anticipate additional savings. We're required to recover 90% of our budget through fees. So accordingly, $861.2 million of this fiscal 2017 budget request would be recovered from NRC licensees, resulting in a net appropriation of $121.1 million. Let me highlight some of the work we plan to achieve. The NRC will continue licensing and oversight activities for 100 operating nuclear power reactors and 31 research and test reactors. The NRC expects to continue reviewing 3 new reactor combined license applications. And additionally, we'll continue inspections of 4 new reactor units under construction and continue our vendor inspection program. We expect to review 1 small modular reactor design certification and to review 3 applications for medical isotope facilities. The budget request provides funding for licensing reviews and oversight activities at reactors undergoing decommissioning, as well as continued oversight over nuclear waste and spent fuel storage facilities. And we expect to review 1 application for a consolidated spent fuel storage facility. We'll continue to license and oversee the safe and secure use of radioactive materials, and in fiscal 2017, the NRC will complete approximately 2,000 materials licensing actions and about 900 routine health and safety inspections. Of note, our 2017 request includes $5 million in non-fee billable activities to develop regulatory infrastructure and related activities to effectively review advanced nuclear reactor applications and technologies. As we continue to work through Project AIM, we are confident the agency is on the right track. The savings have already been identified through a comprehensive evaluation that involves staff and stakeholder input, and are reflected in part in our fiscal year 2017 requests. Still, we remain mindful of the importance of a highly skilled technical staff in carrying out our safety and security mission. While our size may change to reflect efficiency gains, the need for the service we provide the American people remains unchanged. I want to highlight one other area we are focusing on improvement. We're cognizant of the committee's concerns regarding early commissioner involvement in rulemaking and have approved a new approach to do so, and will provide requested information to the committee later, actually beginning of next month, as provided in the committee report on the fiscal year 2016 appropriation. On behalf of the Commission, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you, and I know you share our dedication to our vital mission, and I'd be pleased to answer your questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Others? Ms. Svinicki?
Thank you, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Kaptur, and distinguished members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to appear before you today at this hearing on the NRC's fiscal 17 budget request and associated matters. The Commission's Chairman, Stephen Burns, has outlined an overview of our agency's budget request, as well as a description of some of the key challenges and opportunities before the agency in this year of fiscal 16. As described in the materials provided to your subcommittee concurrent with the budget request, the NRC has continued over the past year its comprehensive initiative to right-size the agency, streamline agency processes to use resources more wisely, improve timeliness in regulatory decision-making, and promote a more unified agency purpose through agency-wide priority setting. When I appeared before your subcommittee at this time last year, I testified that I looked forward to reflecting progress on these initiatives in our future budget submittals to you. I believe our fiscal year 2017 budget request, coupled with the further efficiencies that we have identified and continue to identify under these Project AIM initiatives, demonstrates this progress. The NRC will continue to push forward on each of these fronts in the coming year while continuing to keep our critical mission of public health and safety and security always in the forefront. I appreciate the opportunity to appear and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ostendorff.
Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Kaptur, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the chance to be before you today with my colleagues. I'm in complete alignment with Chairman Burns' testimony this morning. Regarding Project AIM, I want to thank the subcommittee and the full committee for their support of the NRC's structuring our AIM reductions thoughtfully and in a disciplined manner. I am personally pleased at the thoroughness of our staff's work in this area, and I'm confident when all is said and done, we'll be in a better place. Regarding the NRC's work in advanced reactors, I want to highlight a couple of topics here. The NRC submitted a report to Congress in 2012 talking about how we license advanced reactor technologies and our strategy. I believe we are preparing in a thoughtful way for advanced reactor technology license applications. Interest in the subject continues to grow in the United States and overseas. In September of this last year, the NRC co-hosted a workshop with our colleagues at the Department of Energy to discuss the development of these new reactors, and we had this chance to engage our stakeholders in new technologies. Our budget request includes $5 million in non-fee billable resources to continue this work and to ensure that the NRC is in the best possible position to license any such advanced reactor license application that may be submitted to us for our review. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'll look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Baran?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Kaptur, and members of the subcommittee, thanks for the opportunity to appear today. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues to discuss NRC's fiscal year 2017 budget request and the work of the Commission. You've already heard a lot about Project AIM, and no doubt you'll hear quite a bit more before the end of the hearing. I want to briefly share just a few thoughts about this important initiative. I've been very impressed by the willingness of the NRC staff. I'll pull this a little closer. Thank you. I've been very impressed by the willingness of the NRC staff to take a hard, questioning look at what work the agency is doing and how we're doing that work. The staff has identified numerous ways to achieve the substantial savings that are reflected in the fiscal year 2017 budget request. And as my colleagues have noted, the Commission is currently reviewing a long list of additional potential efficiencies. This effort is about more efficiently focusing on the right safety priorities, not about relaxing regulatory oversight of licensee performance and safety. That means identifying further savings while remaining focused on our core mission of protecting public health and safety. As Chairman Burns noted, there has also been congressional interest in ensuring that non-routine NRC rulemakings are approved by the Commission early in the process before significant resources are expended. I agree with that objective. The Commission looked at this issue and decided that the staff should send a brief, streamlined rulemaking plan to the Commission to get approval for each non-delegated rulemaking. We just need to make sure that rulemaking plans stay lean and don't themselves require significant staff resources to prepare so that we can achieve our shared goal of increasing accountability and efficiency. There are, of course, a number of other important efforts underway at NRC, from implementation of post-Fukushima safety enhancements to a decommissioning reactor rulemaking, to preparations for the first small modular reactor design application expected later this year. We're happy to discuss these and any other issues of interest. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, and again, thank you all for being here. I think it's important that all of you be here before the committee, because I want the committee to get a chance to know you and you to know the committee and stuff. So I appreciate all of you taking the time out of what I know is a busy schedule to come here. Ms. Capter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much for yielding to me in this round. Chairman Burns, I wanted to ask you if you could report to the American people on the year of 2015 and the safety of nuclear power production at the 100 commercial reactors and the 31 test and research reactors across our country. How would you compare what happened in 2015 to prior years if you were to give a weather report to the public in terms they can understand? How did 2015 compare to prior years?
I think there was continued good performance overall within the industry. We had a couple plants go into what we call column 4, which required an enhanced oversight on our part. The Arkansas Nuclear 1 and the Pilgrim plant, both operated by Entergy. So we're providing an additional oversight on that. Again, apart from the operating fleet, I would note that we continued to inspect the construction of the 4 units in Georgia and South Carolina, and also reached a decision with respect to the operating license for Watts Bar Unit 2 in Tennessee. It has begun pre-operational testing, and commercial operation is expected this spring. The other part of it, which doesn't sometimes get as much attention, is our engagement with the agreement states. As you may know, 37 of the states have an agreement under the Atomic Energy Act, and where they carry out the regulation of radioactive materials under rules compatible with the U.S., with the national standards. I think this is a good example of a very good federal-state partnership, and we continue to engage them. We support them with training and communicate well with that. As Commissioner Ostendorff elaborated on, in terms of we have two issues. One, looking forward, is the question about, and we, as you'll see in the budget proposal, additional areas for engagement on potential advanced reactor design. We expect a new small modular design. That's the one looking forward. The other issue in terms of, again, given electricity markets, cheap natural gas and all that, the question about continued operation of some nuclear units in those markets. So we have indications of what I'll call early shutdowns, from the sense that before the end of the license life. We're prepared to deal with that. We have initiated a rulemaking to make our processes for that a little more efficient and effective. That'll take a few years, but we're able to engage in that and have been. So that's sort of like a 50,000-foot level, if that answers your question.
So in 10 words or less, for 2015, what do you say to the American people about the safe performance of our nuclear plants?
I think there was continued good performance of the nuclear plants in the country overall, and continued work on the enhancements that we identified and industry in cooperation with industry after the Fukushima accident, so to improving safety.
I think it's really important to assure the American people of that safety in words they can understand. I wanted to just ask a second question very briefly. We had testimony from some of our labs last year about the difficulty of recruiting people in very high-level skills. I'd like to ask you, in terms of qualified nuclear engineers who are citizens of the United States, as well as qualified technicians, nuclear technicians in the electrical field, for example, plumbing, pipe fitting, all the skills that are necessary. Do you have any specific focus on that recruitment issue and education issue, so we are able to recruit U.S. citizens for these positions? How does NRC position itself for that? And that will be my final question on this round.
Okay. The NRC has, as you as the committee will know, has appropriated, included within our appropriations for a number of years, about a $15 million grants program, which we have been administering, and that goes a number. I can provide the number of institutions across the country for the record, but that provides some funding in terms of training programs and similar things, not only at the engineering level, but I think there are some trade school, basically, community colleges and other places where you can get the trades involved. And I know in some of my visits, most recently to the South Texas plant and the Palo Verde plant in Arizona, that's interesting. You can see partnerships between the utility and local community colleges in terms of developing trades and a workforce, that's in effect local, that may contribute as employees of those plants in future years. So again, our role in some respects is a small one, but I think we're trying to be effective with what we have.
I would urge you on in those efforts, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If the gentlelady would yield for just a second before I turn it over to Mr. Frelinghuysen. You didn't ask for the $15 million in this budget request.
That's correct. And that is, again, this is the president's budget, and in terms of the approach the administration has taken toward that, what I will say is it has been now, I think, about 8 or 9 years where it is routinely. Yeah. And we have embraced that and carried it out, I think, in an effective manner.
Well, I appreciate that, and the reason we gave it to the NRC is because we used to do it within the Department of Energy, and the Department of Energy didn't take it very seriously. And so we gave it to the NRC, which I think you've done a good job with. And Mr. Frelinghuysen?
Let me thank you all for taking on the commissioner assignments. I note that Ms. Svinicki is a native of Michigan, but she spent some time in Idaho, so you probably know quite a lot about the chairman, which you probably should keep to yourself. And that Mr. Ostendorff and Mr. Baran worked up here on the Hill. I think it's good, to have you on the other side of the table, since obviously you prepared members of Congress in your respective positions for such testimony. Yes, you want to get an Idaho comment in
No,
here?
I was just going to say, if you deal for just a second, I did want to say, because it's kind of unusual where we got all of the commissioners here, when someone asks a question, if others of you have comments on that and would like to comment on it also, feel free to do so.
I just assume you not comment on your career, but let me say, I know you commanded a submarine as well, so you have another part of our nuclear obligation that comes before this committee. A lot of anxiety, obviously, out there, and I'm within shouting distance of Chuck Schumer, so I won't get into that, but about the relative safety of our nuclear facilities. There was a report, I've read it, or at least seen a summation about cyber attacks. Could you comment about that report? It seemed to be pretty disturbing. I think it is, in general, open sources here, that there's a degree of vulnerability. You've had double the amount of incidents that other federal facilities have been subject to. And what are you doing about it?
Yeah. You're correct, Mr. Frelinghuysen, that there are two reports that came out actually fairly close to. One was the Chatham House report out of the UK, and then the Homeland Security in about a week. The Chatham House was a general report, was a general perspective on cyber, not particularly in the U.S. In fact, no one who prepared that report talked to anybody at the NRC about it. It's not clear who they talked to, an unnamed source. The basic ideas or the keeping the reactor control systems, the critical safety systems separate from the internet. Those are things that are required. Those are the things that are being done here. So that the principles they were enunciated, I think, were good. Homeland Security, about a week or two later, actually gave the nuclear industry a pretty good score in terms of where it was. And part of that, I think, comes from the fact that we had established a set of regulations several years ago, which the industry is implementing, that addresses the cyber security type issues. They've gone through the first phase. We're doing inspections and follow-up inspections this year. There's another phase it will do. But overall, I think this industry is in pretty good stead. It requires vigilance because I think.
So are there a number of contracts, and the IG laid out some evidence that perhaps that maybe some of these contracts might be scrapped and
actually, I apologize. I may be referring to different reports. Our Inspector General issued a report with respect to our internal NRC internal issues, and they talked about there's some issues we need to address in terms of some of our contracts and the like. But overall, we have not experienced a significant attack. We need to be, vigilant on this as every industry
Let me just
does.
A few comments and I'll stop.
Okay.
The report doesn't fault your staff at the National Security Operations Center, the SOC. They're meeting the requirements of the $262 million contract, which I guess expires next May 2017. And this is a quote, the problems are in the contract itself, said the report, which found that the terms require staff to do little more than manage a few antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-spam systems. Is that true? And is this, are we going to upgrade to something a little more proactive?
Yeah, my understanding of this, I'd be pleased to provide more details for the record, is that we are addressing the IG's findings in the contracting process and taking the corrective actions there. So I think we agree with the findings that the IG had. We need to be better.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're pleased to have with us today the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Loy of New York, and I know you've got a very busy schedule, so we'd be happy to
You are very
recognize
gracious,
you next.
Mr. Chairman, and I want to, first of all, thank you for bringing us together for this very important hearing. As you can imagine, I've been concerned about Indian Point. I don't think it's any surprise. It's in Buchanan, New York. It houses 1 decommissioned, 2 operational nuclear power reactors owned by Entergy. And earlier this week, Entergy notified the NRC and state authorities that radioactive tritium contaminated water leaked into the groundwater at Indian Point. Entergy found, quote, alarming levels of radioactivity at 3 monitoring wells. Just this morning, Entergy has reported that tritium levels have gone up in the groundwater beneath Indian Point. This is the 3rd time since 2005 that we know of that tritium has leaked into groundwater at Indian Point. Though contamination has not spread to the Hudson River and does not seem to pose an immediate threat to public health, it's clear that this incident requires a full and thorough investigation. And based on the many problems at Indian Point and what seems to be poor oversight on the part of the NRC, it seems the NRC is not adequately prioritizing public health and safety. There are 3 NRC resident inspectors who work full-time at Indian Point. They're following Entergy's groundwater monitoring program and should have been on top of an inadequate pump system in place in recent years. While your agency is sending another inspector to the site this week, has begun an investigation, I am deeply concerned that the NRC is turning a blind eye to glaring problems at a critical time when Entergy's relicensing process is underway. So a few questions, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. When were these resident inspectors made aware of the groundwater leak at Indian Point? And what actions has the NRC taken to address this tritium leak? Will the NRC be fully investigating the leak, as I urge you to do in a letter earlier this week? And could you elaborate for us what that investigation will entail and when findings should be expected?
Certainly. I believe our resident inspectors and our regional office were informed of the leak or the spill. It would have been Friday evening when Entergy identified it. It wasn't an amount that was actually below the threshold reporting limits, but Entergy reported it to it.
Could I just ask a quick follow-up before you said when Entergy reported it? So there are 3 resident inspectors that are there, and there's no way of them knowing or identifying the leak until Entergy reported it. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the sequence and the process.
Yeah, I would expect, and I can certainly confer with our regional staff, but I would not necessarily expect the resident to be present when the spill or the leak occurred, or something like that. I mean, our inspectors do go through the plant, they observe certain evolutions, but they would not necessarily have seen that right away.
So, I mean, I'm going to let you continue with the approval of our chair, but there are 3 resident inspectors, so I just wonder what they're looking for as they're walking around there full time.
When they're looking for any number of things. They have a particular protocol, I believe, that we set, that an inspector goes out and looks at. They may observe particular plant operations. They may observe the status of equipment and things like that. But they go through the plant at various times to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be incumbent upon them to identify a leak. They have to wait till someone tells them. Is that correct?
Unless they had observed it directly themselves. After all, the operator is responsible for the operations within the license and the license requirements, and is ultimately responsible for the safety of the plant. We can, as I indicated, we will have inspectors. We have the resident inspectors who make observations during their normal rounds in terms of what the plant is doing, as well as send, as you indicated here, we've sent a specialist out there to help with the evaluation of what happened and the significance of it.
Now, as I understand it, Entergy said to you, the NRC, that the rad waste sump pump has been out of service since October 2014. Will the NRC inspectors at Indian Point and other nuclear power plants begin doing annual or semi-annual reviews of all systems at these facilities? I'm just puzzled about that.
Well, I would expect, again, as part of our evaluation of this particular incident, to understand how that contributed to the tritium spill or the tritium leak. I would expect that to happen. We will inspect during outages various pieces of equipment and particular, sometimes operations of equipment and those types of things during our inspection program.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, lastly, it's since 2007 that Entergy has been seeking to extend its licenses for Indian Point's 2 reactors, units 2 and 3, for another 20 years. Mm-hmm. Both of these reactors have eclipsed their original licensing periods. So despite the expiration of their licenses, Indian Point can continue to operate until a final decision is made by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Do you have any updates on when the Commission will make a final decision, and will the recent tritium leak impact the final decision?
I believe that there are a supplemental environmental review is due later this year. And I can provide you for the record what the timing is. I don't happen to know it offhand. I know that there is this supplemental review. The question on the tritium leak, the tritium leak is part of the ongoing oversight process for the plant. I would expect actions related to either the performance of Entergy to be taken account of through our normal oversight and evaluative process for that would not await the license renewal process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calvert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, thank you for being here today. Thanks to your service to our country. After the fall of the Soviet Union, some of the nuclear materials in some regions are still unaccounted for. There have been, as you know, multiple attempts recently by criminal networks with suspected Russian ties that have sought to sell radioactive material to extremists throughout portions of Eastern Europe. These repeated attempts to acquire nuclear materials signals what appears to be a potential nuclear black market that has emerged in several former Soviet states. Investigations have revealed that smugglers are explicitly targeting buyers who are enemies of the West, and those buyers' intentions are to target the West, in particular Americans. Considering the recent breakdown in relations between the West and Russia, cooperation and information sharing on matters has become more complicated. Some individuals within Russia organized crime cling to a Soviet-era hatred of the West. Islamic extremist groups like ISIS obviously share that same hatred. Both organizations have made clear their intent and willingness to use nuclear weapons. This development represents the feared scenario in which organized crime and terrorist organizations like ISIS establish a mutual partnership. What procedures and equipment are in place to ensure that if an extremist would be able to purchase nuclear materials, that they would be prevented from being smuggled into the United States? And considering that we have lost track of nuclear materials here in the U.S., what is being done to ensure bad actors could not acquire the domestic material?
I think the response to your question actually crosses over a number of agencies, and we may actually have less to do with it than some of the others. What we do is we keep in touch with Department of Energy, Customs, Customs Agency, the Customs Agency, and others that might have a role in that. I know, again, this is not something that the NRC operates or licenses, but
if the gentleman would yield, that even bothers me more, because if you have a number of agencies that are looking at this, is there anything being lost between communication between those agencies?
I don't think so. I think we have good cooperation and good communications among the agencies. On our end, what we can do as the NRC is we can do our best with respect to licensable radioactive material in the United States in terms of protecting sources, assuring that licenses are issued only to those who should have licenses. There are security aspects to that in terms of the category and quantity of radioactive or nuclear material. So that's where I think our responsibility, and then in the interagency, and I know Commissioner Ostendorff has experience in that, there's, I think, good communication, cooperation, because we are concerned with that.
Commissioner?
If I may, thank you for the question, Congressman Calvert. I just add two things here. At the NRC, we have responsibilities under federal law to rule on export license applications. And we work very closely with the State Department and the Department of Energy and the National Security Council staff on those matters. The Chairman mentioned the interagency. We often meet, typically every 6 months, in the top secret sensitive compartmented information, TSSCI, briefing in our SCIF at NRC headquarters to receive updates on threat assessments for nuclear materials, smuggling, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, other yachtist groups. And I think each of the commissioners spends quite a bit of time on a regular basis getting periodic updates in between these 6-month briefings. With respect to the National Nuclear Security Administration, I used to be an official there in 2007, 2009. They had the bulk of the programs. For instance, there's a container security initiative to use portal monitors to screen containers coming into the United States, various ports, to detect nuclear materials. And I think NSA does a very good job of keeping us informed of anything they find of a concern in those areas.
Well, I just wanted to bring that up because I can't think of anything more important than keeping nuclear material out of the hands of those who would harm us. One quick question on decommissioning. There's a nuclear facility in California near my congressional district, San Onofre. How long, on the whole issue of decommissioning nuclear facilities, why does it take so long? I've been told by Edison it's going to take 10 years before they would be able to decommission that site. Any comments on that?
There are different approaches to it. They are actually going an approach called decon, which goes toward a more immediate, although, as you indicate, maybe a decade-long process versus what we call safe store, which is basically sit and do it some years later, even 40 years later. But part of it is that it allows the reduction of some residual radioactivity. It allows them to do it in a sort of methodical way. I don't know that there's a magic date or timing they can do it, but it is a big deconstruction project. I know, having gone out to one in Illinois, near Gurnee, in Illinois, northwest of Chicago, the Zion plant, which they are undergoing. And one of the things they told me, they're actually at a point, it's not radioactive material that's the concern. It's actually other heavy metals and other types of hazardous materials that you've got to be careful about as well. It's not just the radiation. For example, if they used lead paint when the plant was built in 1970 for signage and things like that. So from our standpoint, it's a safe approach that they can do. I recognize it may take some time. I don't know.
10 years seems like a lot of time, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Royal Allard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here. The March 2011 accident at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station was caused by a tsunami that was triggered by a powerful offshore earthquake. After the disaster, NRC required U.S. nuclear power plants to reevaluate their seismic risk. NRC is requiring the nuclear plant seismic evaluations, as I understand it, to be submitted to the agency by the end of 2019. Based on the initial seismic screens completed in 2015, how many U.S. nuclear plants may be subject to greater earthquake forces than they were designed to withstand? And in the interim, is NRC requiring nuclear plants to make any major modifications to reduce seismic risk before the plant evaluations are completed in 2019?
I have to supply for the record the number that done. There are a number of them. I believe it's true. I don't know if it's a half dozen or we'll provide that for the record, that had a higher seismic evaluation conducted. What we have done, and for example, in California, the Diablo Canyon, I think it's revised seismic evaluations due in 2017, and Columbia Station in Washington in 2019. What we do expect is that they are capable of meeting their current design basis, and if they've identified areas which there may be vulnerability, that they may be taking additional measures. But for the most part, the plants themselves, in terms of their design, are extraordinarily robust. So we're satisfied, given what we know at this time, that the plants can operate safely pending the final outcomes on the reevaluations.
Okay, and if the evaluations show that some modifications need to happen, what is the timeline, or how long would you expect those things to take?
Pardon? Yeah, we apply on a plant-specific basis, and again, it would be in terms of this assessing the significance of what it is, what the nature of the outcome is, or what the equipment that might be affected. But we would establish a timeline, and again, if there was during that time, we would want either have interim measures that would assure safety, and that could be a variety of things, I think.
Okay. The decommissioning work that the NRC oversees, as has been stated, is critical to ensuring the safety of workers and those who live in neighboring communities. And in the county of Los Angeles, NRC lists 2 sites that are being decommissioned. First, Magnesium Alloy Products of Compton, which use thorium, and second, Isotope Specialties of Burbank, which fabricated radioactive sealed sources and packaged low-level radioactive waste for disposal. After these licenses expired, authorities found radioactive contamination at both sites. What is NRC's responsibility for ensuring that the safety of the public and the environment at these formerly licensed facilities? And also, can you provide an update on the remediation efforts, and who is responsible for the cost of cleaning up the Compton and Burbank sites?
Yeah, I'd be pleased to provide. I am not familiar with those 2 particular sites. There are a number of instances in which licenses that may have been terminated, for example, and I don't know if that's the case with these, under the Atomic Energy Commission, where we've gone back and said that their additional remediation needs to be done, but I'd be pleased to provide you some information that's responsive on that.
I would appreciate it. And just in a more general question, what is NRC doing to ensure that licensed facilities that are closed in the future are held accountable for newly identified contamination post-closure?
Yeah, primarily what we do in terms of closeout inspections, what I would expect us to do is have a thorough assessment of the site, understanding what the historic operations are. That's sometimes the challenge with some of these sites, is that they may have had historic operations, sometimes that went in before you had licensing, before there was licensing either under the AEC or the NRC. So making sure you have good site characterization, that you have good oversight of the activities done to decommission, and that I think going forward, those are the things for those areas that are under our jurisdiction that I think can help the most.
Thank you. Mr. Fleshman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burns, Commissioners, thank you all for being before us today. I represent the 3rd District of Tennessee. That's an East Tennessee district. Nuclear energy is important to my district. From the TVA Sequoia and Watts Bar facilities in the south to the famous X-10 nuclear reactor in Oak Ridge, which is the oldest reactor in the world. In my view, nuclear provides clean electricity, creates American jobs, and stimulates the United States economy. Chairman Burns, I'm very interested in the development of small modular reactors, and this subcommittee has made funding for them a priority. As we anticipate an SMR application in the next year or so, what is the NRC's plans to address the funding, technical, and licensing issues of SMRs to support their commercialization?
We expect to receive a design certification application from NuScale, which is located in Oregon, at the end of this year. And for, I think, the last 2 years or so, I know it was going on before I came back to the NRC in late 2014. Our staff has been engaged with NuScale to make sure that I think on both sides, we have a good understanding of expectations. What, in terms of, we have an understanding in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the technology, as well as they understand our needs in terms of what's needed for the design certification. And I think that dialogue has gone pretty well and puts us in good stead to receive and act on the design certification that we'll get. The funding, we don't provide the funding for the design development and all that. That's primarily through the Department of Energy, and I think they've received some funding through the DOE. But one other thing I would add is, in addition to the new scale application, I think we do expect to receive from Tennessee Valley Authority an application for an early site permit. Basically, it's at the Clinch River site, and basically what that is, it's looking at the site with an assumed technology. It gets you a review of some of the environmental issues and siting issues, geology, seismology, things like that. So I believe we are receiving that this spring, sometime this spring, I think in April.
Thank you. In your consideration of SMR license applications, are there lessons to be learned from the recent licensing of Watts Bar 2 and the Westinghouse AP1000 plant at Vogtle and VC Summer Nuclear Power Station?
Probably less so from Watts Bar 2, because Watts Bar 2 was completed under the two-phase licensing process of a construction permit followed by an operating license. Now, it may well be that if some future applicants are interested in going that way, you can use the two-step, or you can use the so-called one-step licensing that the Summer and Vogtle have gone through. So there may be some things to learn, and I believe our staff is sort of doing the knowledge management on that. Commissioner Svinicki.
Something that I'd like to bring to the subcommittee's attention, in my time as a commissioner, I've occasionally been concerned that agencies like NRC are very tradition-bound. We are most comfortable making decisions on what we're familiar with, which is the large light water reactors like Watts Bar 2. And as we look over the horizon at small modular reactors, but maybe even more so to other advanced technologies that I know your subcommittee has heard from DOE about multiple times, I wondered about our flexibility to adapt our regulations to something that looks quite a bit different from what we've licensed, which, by the way, we're cautious about even those and take quite a bit of time to do. So I've really challenged the NRC staff to say, what are the measures that could give us confidence when we tell Congress, if we get an SMR, we could do this in 4 years or something, half the time of what we've been doing. Something that is an odd analogy, I think, is that my confidence was raised that our staff has completed a review of it's not a reactor, in Janesville, Wisconsin, or near there, there's proposed to be a medical isotope production facility, and that applicant came in kind of medical space, but it was a different kind of aqueous reactor, kind of a reactor, quasi-technology to make medical isotopes. And I was impressed, and my confidence was increased at NRC's ability to be a little bit more agile and adaptable in adapting the regulatory framework to something else, because the NRC staff, this application and technology didn't fit neatly at all into the regulations that we have. But what they did is they looked at applicable parts of the regulations and said, take this from power reactors, this from other material space, and we were able to find both a legal and technical path to do that. And I think that was an accomplishment for us, because it was something we had not licensed before. And it isn't a perfect solution for SMRs and advanced reactors, but I do think it's a demonstration of something real in terms of our flexibility.
I agree. Thanks.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back and wait for round two.
Thank you. Mr. Fortenberry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for joining us today. What's the future of nuclear power in America? Or let me rephrase the question. In the world?
The interesting part of the answer to that question is I think if you look at, you wind up in worldwide, you wind up having to look at different places. Start with the United States. Right now, we have with cheap natural gas, what I will hear from utility executives, distortions in the electricity market in terms of how they see their nuclear units valued. So you have somewhat an uncertainty. You have units being built in the Southeast and in regulated markets, and we have applications. We just issued yesterday the authorization for the combined licenses for South Texas Units 3 and 4, and they talk as if they are very serious about that. So that's in the U.S. If you look in Europe, you have an extraordinarily, my 3 years there, it was, it's extraordinarily in terms of how people talked about it. You have the Germans with the Energiewende, we're turning away from nuclear, although buying some French nuclear and buying Polish coal generation. You have the United Kingdom going forward with its program. You have Eastern Europe going forward with its program. Then you move to Asia, where you have India and China. China on a very aggressive building program, and India less so, but you also growing their nuclear generation. And then you have the question of so-called new entrants. Will countries like Vietnam, you have a country like the UAE with 2 units under construction, another 2. So you have a kind of a mixed bag. I'm probably not the best fortune teller or forecaster on that, but that's what I've seen across the world on it.
Well, the question becomes, maybe you can explain if there is any, your interaction with other countries' design standards. Because to Mr. Calvert's question, the reality is if we are going to have nuclear power, we're going to have problems with nuclear science. The waste, the technology getting in the wrong hands, the switches being flipped to potential military uses. So while I understand that's not the fullness of your charge, nonetheless, you're out on point, creating the regulatory atmosphere to ensure safety. But also, I would hope to be helping us think strategically about how to prevent nonproliferation of harmful technology and new options for dealing appropriately with waste and other problems. This is the second part of the question. If you return to the small modular reactor, what does that buy us in terms of those questions I just posed?
I think that's an interesting question, because some of the things, for example, that we will need to look at, we've started to look at some of those in the siting, is what is the security profile for an SMR? In fact, the question of the number of operators that you need in a control room for an SMR. That's more of a safety question. But that's one of those things that we need to deal with. We've put out, I think for comment, public comment, the question on the what's the emergency planning profile for the small modular reactors. A lot of what you do here, and I think partly that's going to be to the extent that DOE helps with that. Part of it's our engagement, that there is in some of the advanced designs more inherent protection from a security safeguards perspective. I think those are important things to look at. I think and that's something that I think not just us in the United States, to the extent like there's a Generation 4 forum, those are the types of things that they will look at as well. So those are good questions. I'm not sure we have all the answers yet, but what you hear is that there are some aspects of that in terms of from the safeguard security standpoint that you may have sort of better inherent
well, yeah, assuming this is the way of the future and these become scalable and easily replicatable, it doesn't lessen the questions, the deeper, harder questions. In fact, it makes it worse. Not just in terms of your job in making sure the immediate site is secure and that there's not going to be any significant accident, but this larger issue of the problematic strategy that's facing humanity, or the problems of facing humanity in general, about a strategy in which we control this technology and all of the potential harm that can come from it.
Yes, and one of the things that we can do as NRC, and we are doing, that NRC does to the extent that DOE and on some of the broader non-proliferation issues you raised, is we're engaged with the International Atomic Energy Agency in terms of looking at, there's a new forum on SMRs there through my old organization, the Nuclear Energy Agency at the OECD. There's a multinational design evaluation program where there's cooperative, and they're starting to look at the SMR.
Mr. Chairman, do I still have time?
Gentleman's time has expired.
Okay, I'll wait.
For this round.
Thank you.
Mr. Valadao?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I understand the NRC has been working hard to reduce the licensing backlog that has grown over the past 4 years, and the NRC prioritizes license amendment requests based on the importance to safety. However, some license amendment requests do not necessarily impact safety, but involve improvements in the economic performance and reliability of the plants. Many of these plant changes can only be performed during plant outages, which occur every 18 to 24 months, which highlights the importance of a timely review by the NRC. Delays by the NRC in processing license amendment requests can have significant impacts on the plant's bottom line, and hopefully, also the actual rate that our folks pay, by pushing off significant capital improvement projects. Safety should come first, but because NRC is the country's sole commercial nuclear licensing and regulatory authority, it is imperative that the NRC provide timely servicing of the licenses it issues. Do you agree that license holders should be able to establish and rely on schedules that assume NRC will live up to its commitment to process all licensing actions within 2 years? And do you believe that the NRC staff should adhere to the internal procedures to ensure timely and disciplined review of the license amendment requests? And what is the NRC's long-term strategy for ensuring the capability to provide predictable and reliable and timely processing of license amendment requests?
I do agree that it's important for us to set objectives like the 2-year objective. Again, they may not be hard and fast in all circumstances, but it gives us something to work to. It enhances, I think, communication with the licensees and the like. What we've been doing over the last couple of years, we have been working down the licensing backlog, and I believe through 2016 or by 2017 we will have worked it off. So we've been giving that some I think good attention, and are trying to meet those goals and objectives.
All right. I think I might have time for one more, if I'm not mistaken, Chairman. One of the goals of Project AIM is to ensure adequate sizing of the agency is achieved by 2020, with the target of 3,400 full-time equivalents. When Project AIM's efforts began, NRC budget was well over $1 billion and with 3,778 staff positions. With FY16, the NRC was appropriated approximately $1 billion, and NRC set a target staff ceiling of 3,600 positions by the end of fiscal year. Based on the current projections, NRC seems to have met the ceiling, that ceiling target at the beginning of this calendar year. Your request for fiscal year 2017 again requests a decrease in funding as well as a decrease in staff. Because the previously anticipated level of reactor licensing did not occur, areas that had grown in anticipation of the projected workload demand, such as staffing and acquisition of a third building at a headquarters complex, should be re-examined, because housing is now a major fixed cost that the NRC carries annually in its budget. The committee would benefit from better understanding what actions the NRC is considering to reduce its housing footprint at the headquarters complex once its right-sizing efforts are completed. Do you agree that the NRC should be reevaluating the need to occupy 3 buildings, especially in light of the staffing reduction targets? If so, what are the NRC's plans to right-size the physical footprint?
Well, in point of fact, we are the minority tenant in the 3rd building as at this point. Importantly, the most important thing probably we have in there is our operations center, which was upgraded a few years ago, and we have some staff offices, but we are the minority tenant. As we look at the overall staffing size of the agency, I would agree. We need to look at what's our footprint, what do we need in terms of space, and to the extent we don't need, be responsible about the space we have, and if where possible, reduce our footprint if it maintains our thing. I think Commissioner Svinicki wanted to add something.
Congressman, I was listening very closely to the figures in your question, and if I heard correctly, I agree with all of the figures that you quoted. I did want to offer one clarification. I think you quoted 3,400 FTE as the ultimate goal for the Project AIM in the year 2020. I want to clarify, it is accurate that we published that figure. It was a preliminary staff estimate at the very beginning of our Project AIM work. It is not informed by any of the work that we've done over, I'd say, the last 18 months. And the Commission has not endorsed this figure. The Commission did endorse a figure of 3,600 for the current fiscal year as an interim step, but I think it's fair to say that the Commission does not feel it has adequate information to know if 3,400 is the right number, so we never endorse that. And we certainly have encouraged our staff not to be bound. Frankly, I think that, as a personal view, that figure may not be ambitious enough. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, in your testimony, you indicated that the NRC expects to review an application for interim consolidated storage in 2017. It's my understanding that waste control specialists in Texas announced that they may submit a license application during the coming year. It's also my understanding that there's an energy alliance in New Mexico that may also, at some point, submit an application. I don't think the time is as clear. Do you have enough money in your budget to adequately address 1 and possibly 2 applications during the coming year? And if not, what are you lacking to make sure that they receive consideration?
I think my understanding is that we do have the money available in the current budget to address the waste control specialists, which, as you indicated, is the first expected application. It may require some reprogramming of funds, and then if it triggers the marks, we would come to the committee on it. But that's it. Because we didn't expect it at the time the 2016 budget was promulgated. We didn't particularly plan for it, but we think we have the room in there for that. And the other, the one in New Mexico, I think is not expected till 17. It's not in the budget, so I think we'd have to look. I think, again, my understanding is we may be able to shift some funds in it and to be able to cover that, but we could make sure we're clearer on that for the record.
If you could, for the record, that you're clear for, if nothing else, the Texas application, assuming that it would come online for 16, I'd appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Just as far as spent nuclear fuel storage, what's in the pipeline, and how do you expect to prioritize different application requirements?
Primarily, the new things are these potentially consolidated storage sites. Other sites, I would have, I apologize, I'd have to get you for the record. There may, a number of plants already have the storage capacity. They've done the above ground dry storage, or they've done the dry storage pads, or and some are working to it. I'd be pleased to provide what new ones we may be getting from individual sites. I just don't have that number on the top of my head.
But it wouldn't be your anticipation that would be for the coming fiscal year?
Pardon?
You wouldn't anticipate those to be coming for the coming fiscal year we're funding. I just want to make sure you have enough resources if there's other things coming over the transom.
Yeah, I think we're okay on that, but I will check back on that.
If you could,
For
for
you.
the record.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me ask a couple questions about the budget. First, I'd like to thank the Commission for the work that you have done thus far to develop the issues and issue a supplemental environmental impact statement for Yucca Mountain because the Department of Energy seems to refuse to do so. Can you lay out for us the schedule to complete the EIS supplemental, and do you have sufficient funds to complete the supplemental?
We do have sufficient funds to complete the supplemental statement. I anticipate it being issued this spring. My recollection was that it's sometime this spring, March. Okay.
Could you tell me what the next steps would be after the EIS supplemental, and do you have sufficient funds for this next step? And if not, what additional funds would be required in 2017?
What we have is the remaining carryover from the high level that was appropriated earlier from the high level waste fund. We would have on the order of about $2 million, which essentially we have, as I believe we've informed the committee before, targeted toward transferring the bulk of the documentation into our archival, the so-called ATOM system, document system. And then that expends what we have. The steps, once the staff issues the environmental statement, the remaining steps with respect to what the agency would have to do relate to the hearing process that's required under the Act. And we have pending, when the hearing was suspended, about 288 contentions that would go in front of our licensing board, and then ultimately the decision would be subject to review by the commission. We have estimated in the past that to complete a review would take on the order of about $330 million.
Would that be necessary in the next year budget, or how long would that take?
No, that would be
over what period of time?
It would be multiple years, and I'm not quite sure of the breakdown of that.
Okay. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the NRC has taken important first steps toward right-sizing. The budget request for fiscal year 2017 is $19.8 million below the fiscal year 2016 and projects a reduction of 90 FTEs, has been mentioned. Before we discuss the right-sizing process in greater detail, I have a couple questions about the budget request. Do you all agree that the budget request will not impact safety?
I agree. It will not have an adverse effect on safety.
I agree.
Everybody agrees with that? Okay. Do any of you have any additional comments on the actions that you have taken as part of the budget process to ensure that safety remains a top priority?
As we develop the budget, I think that's always our top priority. We'll look at those things where it's important for us to maintain oversight, where it may be important to us to have interface. For example, I mentioned our agreement state partners, where it's important to be able to move through an effective licensing process that assures safety and security. So I'm comfortable with where we are in this budget on that.
Okay. In your testimony, it mentions that $41.1 million in savings for fiscal year 2017 has been identified as a result of the rebaselining. Does that budget request reflect any of these savings?
It reflects about $10 million of those savings. Again, partly because the process of our development, you know, the budget development process, these were things we identified when we went through the executive branch process. We were fairly comfortable with about the 10 million, and what we done in what the staff has identified in the rebaselining paper, which I think we've provided to your staff, is identified about 31 million additional areas, which are before the commission for review right now. We got the paper about a week ago, but that do reflect some additional, having taken a hard look, they reflect some additional potential savings.
And I understand the difficulty that we're kind of in the middle of a lot of changes that are going on and so forth. Will you be done with that and be able to identify whether that additional $31 million in savings is a reality and savings that can be achieved by the time we do a budget around here, or do an appropriation bill, do you think, in the next 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, I would expect that.
Donna's looking at me like 2, 3, 4 months. We're talking 2 months maybe.
I think that's our intention. I've read myself, my colleagues can speak for themselves. I've read the paper, I've flagged. I think the staff did a good job, but sometimes they're talking in shorthand, even to some of us who work within the building, and I want to make sure I understand what those things are, and I've got a handful of those. So that's part of our due diligence, and I expect my colleagues probably are in the same boat.
Yes, Chairman Simpson, I believe to a person it's our intention to act promptly, and the NRC staff has made very clear to us their desire for a timely commission decision so that we can inform this budget cycle and your work.
Thank you.
I would just add, so the staff identified 151 specific items that would generate potential savings. And a number of those, I think it's 29, were incorporated into the FY 2017 budget request. The rest of them were not. And so before the commission right now is the 151 for our review. And to your prior question about, is there anything in this budget that we feel would adversely impact safety, I think that's a key part of our review of these 151 items. I want to take a close look at those and make sure we're not doing anything that's going to relax regulatory oversight of licensee performance and safety. That, for me, is going to be a top priority, looking at those 151. I think a lot of them are going to make a lot of sense. There are a few of them that could involve reduced inspection hours, for example. I would give those a hard look.
Okay.
I would say that I've looked at the 150 and have discussed with my staff just this week. Along with other commissioners, we're paying prompt attention to this. When I look at the reactor oversight program in last year, for instance, enhanced oversight for Arkansas Nuclear One and the Pilgrim plant in Massachusetts, in our baseline inspection program activities that Commissioner Baran's referring to, it's not apparent to me that any of these proposed reductions would negatively impact our oversight, but we need to dot a couple of I's and cross some T's here.
Thank you. Ms. Kaptur?
I would like to yield to Congresswoman Lowy for a final question, and then I'll...
Thank you for your gracious hospitality. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, as well. Chairman Burns, I just wanted to bring to your attention some questions regarding the AIM pipeline. Spectra, which is an energy company, as you know, is constructing the Algonquin Incremental Market Expansion, the AIM project, which would expand a natural gas pipeline which runs just 100 feet from vital Indian Point structures. This is of great concern to me and many of my constituents, and I strongly believe that the NRC has not adequately investigated the risk nor responded substantively to the concerns that have been raised. I remain particularly disappointed in your conclusion that a further independent risk analysis beyond NRC's internal analysis is unnecessary. So my question is, does the presence of a potentially dangerous pipeline impact the security procedures NRC mandates at a nuclear power plant? And what steps does the NRC plan to take to ensure the Indian Point evacuation plan is updated to reflect the additional risk of a pipeline in the vicinity?
Congresswoman Lowy, we have looked at the pipeline issue. In fact, we met with our staff met with one of the persons, Mr. Cooperwich, last week on it. as well. Our evaluation is that there is not the hazard, there is not an adverse impact on the Indian Point plant. Having said that, I believe we would look at what the impact might be, and I'd have to consult with our staff in terms of what they have done or what additional action might be required because of the analysis they've done on what I'll call the security or if there is a impact or potential impact on the security barriers. I don't know the answer to your question immediately, but I can ask our staff to inform you of that. But that again would be our primary looking at it. Would be concerned. Our concern is assuring that there is not an adverse impact on the safe operation of the plant or equipment or barriers involved or security barriers at the plant.
So in just trying to understand this, does the presence of a potentially dangerous pipeline impact the security procedures, the NRC mandates at a nuclear power plant?
What the impact of a pipeline or a facility that could have that has, for example, an explosive. Here, the question is basically a rapid explosion and release from that pipeline. Those types of things are taken into account or looked at when new projects come in where an existing site is, or are taken into account in the licensing of a new facility. And what our staff does is makes an evaluation whether or not it has an adverse impact from the ability, in terms of the ability to shut down the plant or protect the plant or something like that.
So then the question is, are there steps that the NRC plans to take to ensure the Indian Point evacuation plan is updated to reflect the additional risk of a pipeline in the vicinity?
I would have to consult with the staff, and I'd be pleased to get you an answer for that.
And I would appreciate that. And then one other question that I wondered with regard to Indian Point. We talked before about the multiple safety issues at Indian Point. The recent tritium leak, transformer fires, elevated motor temperatures, temperature issues on the seals of the reactors. In the last 2 years, Entergy has blamed vendor failures for major malfunction that resulted in shutdowns at Indian Point. I just wondered, do other nuclear power plants experience so many vendor failures at this rate? And has the NRCC thoroughly evaluated these vendor failures at Indian Point?
We look at, as part of our review, what the attributed cause of a failure or a violation or some sort of transient at the plant. I couldn't speak right now as to whether or not Entergy's blaming vendors more than another licensee may. Ultimately, the licensee is responsible for the safe operation of its plant. It may have issues in terms of with respect to its vendors, but ultimately they need to have processes in place that assure the quality of the material that they're installing in the plant, as well as maintaining the plant.
Okay, and lastly, I think this is an issue that's come up over and over again. If the 50-mile area around Indian Point were to be evacuated, every resident of Westchester County, New York City, Even parts of Long Island would be forced to evacuate. Quite simply, there's no way to move all those people safely. So, for many of us, Indian Point's evacuation plan leaves much to be desired, relying on buses to get residents away from the potential hazard in the event of an emergency. The plant in Shoreham was built but not allowed to go into operation because there was no feasible evacuation plan. Does the NRC actually believe the evacuation plan for Indian Point is feasible? And could you share what the NRC is doing to work with nuclear power plants in densely populated regions to improve evacuation plans?
Well, we certainly work with federal and state partners with respect to emergency planning and emergency preparedness around nuclear power plant sites. Ultimately, those entities, other federal entities such as FEMA and the state, affected states, are responsible for emergency preparedness backgrounds. We have found the emergency plans for the Indian Point plant meet federal requirements, but we continue to work with, as I say, with federal and state partners in terms of improving and exercising those plans.
And lastly, really lastly, do you have any update on when the commission will make a final decision on relicensing? And I wonder whether the recent tritium leak will impact that decision.
The impact, our evaluation of the tritium leak will go into our normal oversight process, and the consequences of the significance of that would be taken into account as part of our day-to-day or evaluation and oversight of operations. My understanding about the Indian Point renewal proceeding is that there is a supplemental environmental statement that is due out this spring, later this spring. There are potentially some additional hearing with respect to that, and there could be a decision later this year. But I think rather than let me make sure we supplement that for the record, because I think there's more timing. There happens to be an unusual situation. I'm actually recused from the decision on the renewal because of my prior role as a senior staff counsel at the agency at some time ago. But I'd be pleased to get you the information you want.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I thought you were recused because you moved to Westchester County, but no.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Ostendorff, I wanted to hear about your upcoming visit to my district to speak at the Advanced Reactor Summit at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And then I'm going to have a follow-up question, sir. But before I do that, I wanted to convey to you my sincere thanks and appreciation, not for the work only that you do at the NRC for the past 6 years, but for all you've accomplished for the people of Tennessee and our country in your service at the House Armed Services Committee, at the NNSA, and of course in our great United States Navy, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'm flying out this afternoon to Knoxville. I'll be speaking at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, delivering a keynote speech on advanced reactor technology at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. The key messages I'll be delivering will be discussing the NRC's readiness to receive license applications for small modular reactors and other non-light water reactor advanced technologies. I'll be talking about the experience we've had with our current fleet units under construction in Georgia and South Carolina, as well as Watts Bar, the NuScale experience that was discussed by colleagues here, and also be talking about our experience with non-light water reactor technologies over the last 30 years. So looking forward to engaging with the folks at Oak Ridge.
Thank you, sir. Follow-up question. There's concern over the future of licensing new nuclear technologies, which are venture-funded startups. The NRC's current process for licensing isn't compatible with this new funding model. How does the NRC plan to meet this challenge?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Let me just talk a little bit about the experience we've had so far to date in pre-application meetings with NuScale. And again, as the chairman mentioned, we're expecting a license application from NuScale in December of this year. Our staff's been working very closely in pre-application meetings with their executives, their scientists and engineers. Our staff has approved what we call design-specific review standards that would guide our staff's review of an actual license application. And I think a lot of the technology issues, whether or not electrical power is required to meet certain safety requirements, the use of passive safety features, new design aspects have been addressed and will continue to be addressed by our staff. Mike Johnson, who's our Deputy Executive Director for Operations for Reactors, and Jennifer Ewell, who heads our new reactor office, have also been discussing the use of a stepwise approach to provide incremental decisions back to potential investors through our work in pre-application meetings with an applicant or potential applicant to give them partial answers based on submittals that will deal with one aspect of a design. So I think we're making good progress in that area, and I'm looking forward to see applications coming in.
Thank you, sir. My next question is for all of you all. If you'd like to participate, I encourage that. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory is the home to CASTLE, the Consortium for Advanced Simulation of Light Water Reactors. CASTLE uses modeling and simulation to improve the performance and safety of commercial nuclear reactors. I'm interested in knowing what kind of relationship you have with CASTLE and encourage you to take advantage of the valuable work being done at ORNL.
Congressman, thank you for the question. I have had the opportunity to visit Oak Ridge during my service as a commissioner. I did want to note that you mentioned the X-10, the historic facility. I will say that as a bit of a nerd about science and someone who studied nuclear science, it was amazing to stand in that location and think about the atomic pioneers of the United States. So I'm glad we have that type of preservation of facilities like that, and I commend the folks at Oak Ridge for realizing that it's a part of our history. And my only regret is we couldn't get every middle school science student to come through there. It might kindle some, engender some enthusiasm or more enthusiasm about science. I did meet with the researchers in CASTLE, and they're an impressive bunch, but I think very significantly, not only in terms of what's happening at Oak Ridge, CASTLE is a consortium, and it involves research institutions across the country, academic and DOE national labs, and I think that kind of synergistic leveraging is how we can afford to do the cutting-edge science that we need to do. It's leveraging virtual collaboration across the country through high-speed communications tools and getting time on supercomputers at various DOE labs. But I was energized about it. I did listen to the presentations with an eye of saying, how could NRC leverage some of its research needs? I'm not sure that at my level I walked away with any dazzling ideas of my own about how that could be done, but I think that the CASTLE Consortium is moving our cutting-edge knowledge on nuclear science in the right direction.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to comment?
No.
Good. Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back and know if there's some more questions.
Honorable Allard?
The NRC is organized into four distinct regions which oversee all licensees and facilities. And while some of these regions have experienced nuclear reactor decommissionings, others have received an influx of nuclear power plant constructions. As part of the overall Project AIM plan to enhance operational efficiencies, have you looked at ways to incorporate these regional differences into future plans for the NRC? And does it continue to make sense to think about the NRC in terms of this regional distribution?
I think that the current regional distribution does make sense. Sometimes you get some questions about whether it might make more sense to, say, move the oversight of a particular reactor into a different region because you have other reactors operated by the same company in that other region. We once had 5 regions in the NRC, and about 20 years ago, We eliminated the Region 5, which was primarily the West Coast, and it's now overseen by our Region 4 that operates out of Dallas. What we have done with some of the regional offices is we have actually consolidated some activities into those regions, and I think, let my colleagues chime in, but I think I'm satisfied about where that is now. For example, our Region 2 office out of Atlanta is doing the new reactor construction oversight at the Vogel and Summer plants and at the Watts Bar plant. So that's where an expertise. They also do the fuel facilities across the countries. Our Region 1 and Region 3 offices, because that's where the bulk of the materials licensees that are still under direct NRC jurisdiction, they have responsibility for that. So I think in the past, we've taken some advantage of that leveraging and efficiency by consolidating some of those activities when the activity isn't as prevalent in one of the regions. For decommissioning, I think that's an interesting question, right? But I think right now, because you have activity in the various regions, it probably makes sense to continue with that model, because I can think of probably in most of the regions that there's ongoing work in that area.
Okay. To improve the transparency and to simplify how the NRC calculates and accounts for fees and the timeliness of communicating fees, which is a key process strategy of Project AIM, what specific measures has the NRC taken to improve transparency and engage with the regulated community on fees, and what actions have been taken to simplify how the NRC calculates fees and what still needs to be done?
Yeah. We've been holding public meetings with our stakeholders, mostly fee payers are probably most of the folks that come to that meeting, as you would expect. So our chief financial officer has been doing that. She's responsible for the development of the fee rule. We've been doing some things to align the fee rule more closely to our budget process and budget requests. So I think that helps transparency, because you're not trying to interpret two different ways of both ultimately accurate, but two different ways of looking at it. So those are some of the steps. We'll be publishing soon the fiscal year 2016 rule, probably about the beginning of March. Again, I think having some public outreach on that. It takes some work, but I think we're getting better at it.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Fortenberry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to return to the earlier question, particularly as you brought up the interaction you have with the International Atomic Energy Agency and standard setting worldwide. I see the IAEA as growing not only in relevance but prominence, and necessarily so, given the trajectory of nuclear power and nuclear threats. The mission of the agency seems to be shifting from one of ensuring safety to one of ensuring non-proliferation, and that's a very important shift. Mm-hmm. So explain your interaction with them. This is a mysterious question to me, how we do provide funding for them through a variety of means. Does any of that come from your agency?
And to take the last question I asked, I think only indirectly, in the sense that we provide experts who may attend meetings, some of our technical experts. I attend the general conference that's held once a year as part of a U.S. delegation. So my understanding, that's the primary way that direct. The rest of it is through, I think, primarily through the State Department budget. Department of Energy probably has this in a similar way in terms of support of certain things. But I think primarily the funding comes through the State Department's support for international organizations. Now, I recall the first part of your question. Our engagement, again, primarily is on civil nuclear safety, civil nuclear security, and where that has interface with non-proliferation. And IAEA has always had, in a sense, that dual role. In many ways, when it was founded, coming out of President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech in the early 1950s. Part of the idea was to move down from nuclear weapons, but make the availability of atomic energy for civilian purposes available and necessary. That's the primary place that we play a role in terms of participating in some of the what I call standards making activities. We also do that through the OECD, NEA. Most of those and a good example of where standards, this is more on the, well, actually, I'll give you an example both on what I call a more purely safety side or as well as a security side, is we adopt, as do many in the international community, the IAEA transport regulations. They're promulgated as guides and then adopted international. We and DOT will adopt them, and that helps in terms of protection of material both from a safety and security standpoint. The other thing, for example, in source security, one of the things, particularly after 9/11, well, it was going on before 9/11 because it was, I think as Mr. Calvert noted, it came out of the problems identified with basically abandoned materials in the former Soviet Union. But then after 9/11, the new concern about terrorists getting material. So there is an IAEA code of conduct, which the U.S. has subscribed to, and in many ways our Part 37, which is for source security, reflects those types of ways of trying to provide security over sources. So that sort of quick illustrations, I think, about where we contribute, where we try to use the standards that are developed.
All the questions I've asked are pointed at the need for all of us to think strategically about, I think, to your earlier point, we all do this. We tend to get captured by what is in front of us and rather than what ought to be or could be. Because of your clear leadership in terms of setting policy or enforcing policy, that to me dictates a certain necessity of relying upon you as well for strategic advice in this regard. Yes, sir.
If I can just add, NRC staff frequently presents NRC, U.S. industry best practices at IAEA conferences, workshops. We have staff that participates in leading missions to other countries to help try to show best practices to other countries trying to develop standards. I had a chance last June to give a major speech in Vienna talking about our cybersecurity practices, what we do in the United States to the international community. Other commissioners do similar outreach in their speaking engagements. So I think we are very much aligned with your notion that we take a strategic leadership role.
Mr. Chairman, I began my questioning today, Chairman Burns, with asking you to grade the nuclear power industry's safety and security for 2015, and you gave it a pretty good grade. In view of Mrs. Lowy's questioning, Congresswoman Lowy's questioning about the tritium leaks at Indian Point, as we begin 2016, how do you think the industry is doing compared to 2015?
Well, it may be too early to tell, but I think for the most part, we've seen continued good performance. The Indian Point issue is one we are following up on, but I would note again that we were informed of it by the licensee at a reporting below what was the mandatory reporting threshold. So I think that, I give them some credit for that. They're obviously in a highly charged environment up there, and they're closely watched. But we will see issues in performance. I think we're on top of it, and overall so far, about 6 weeks into the year, generally good performance.
I want to ask a question following on that on Project AIM and the relationship of that to corporate support and how we are ensuring the safety and security of our nuclear power production in this country. Can you expand on your comments so far about how you intend to ensure that Project AIM maintains or improves current safety and security requirements?
Yes. One of the things, under Project AIM, one of the other things that we've done, besides the rebaselining report, is we as a commission approved what's called a strategic workforce planning. And why that is so important, I think, is because it is having our human resources office, in coordination with all of our staff technical offices, focus on what are the technical skills we need to maintain as an agency so we can do those things we're expected to do: inspect, review license applications, learn from operating experience, and the like. So I think that's key. That's one of the keys, and that came out of Project AIM. When we talk about corporate support, one of the things we were looking at through Project AIM is how to be more effective in providing the support to the staff. Corporate support and overhead type activities, it's your computer, it's the office space you're in, it's the training, it may be the training that you undertake. So we need to make sure our people are supported with those things, but what we've identified, and that's what we're going to look at in this rebaselining report, I think primarily where you're looking at a lot of areas where you may get administrative type efficiencies. We need to be careful, as Commissioner Baran said, that some of those that have the interface with the safety mission, to make sure that to making a decision, no, we don't need to do that, that we're making a good, well-informed decision that doesn't affect safety.
That is a concern because Commissioner Baran inferred that, there might be fewer inspections. You kind of hinted at that. And in view of Mrs. Lowy's situation and my personal experience, horrendous experience over 3 decades of service now, with 2 massive problems at a nuclear power plant that I represent, I have to tell you I am very concerned about the industry at a point where natural gas prices and oil prices are impacting what's happening across the energy industry. And some of these plants, from a operating standpoint, are facing additional pressures and economic pressures in the marketplace. And so I'm very worried about investment in equipment, personnel, and so forth. And how does a tritium leak happen at a plant? How was it possible that the cores cover the reactor head at a plant in Ohio was eaten through completely by the boric acid reaction with the steel? How's that even possible? To a point where it was quite dangerous. And so I am very worried about how you are protecting the safety of the public in view of what's happening in the marketplace. Do you want to comment on that?
Where I think we maintain our presence and our oversight, particularly through our resident and program at sites, when we have incidents such as Congresswoman Lowy described at Indian Point, where we send out specialty inspectors and have that type of reactive inspection, that's where we're providing substantial value in the inspection area. And those are the types of things we're not pulling back under Project AIM. Having that maintaining that core staff, undertaking that responsibility remains at the centerpiece, the central point of our activities.
Well, Mr. Commissioner, you Mr. Chairman, you also in your budget you talked about training and staff and so forth, and I, in my first round, asked about trained personnel. Your budget does not include an appropriation for the Integrated University Program for high-level nuclear engineers, and I asked you about other trained personnel who are actually on the ground in these plants, moving between plants, and how they're trained. I'm going to, and there's nothing specific in the budget on that, but I'm going to ask you for your regions to provide for the record the types of relationships the NRC has for its training programs with various apprenticeship programs, community college programs, through its integrated university program with universities. I want to know what you're doing because I think the pipeline is very haphazard. I can tell you for the plant that I represent, if it were not for the workers, and these were not nuclear engineers that went into that plant in the 1980s and the 1990s, we would have had a nuclear mishap there. So that training is so important. And because of their work, we were able to remediate two very serious situations in both decades requiring enormous investment by the private sector to upgrade those plants. So I have fought for so many years unsuccessfully in this Congress to have more robust nuclear training programs. And I'll tell you, it was the plumbers and pipe fitters, it was the electricians that went in at risk their own lives, not knowing what was happening, that saved us. And I want to give them more primacy in your budget and more direct relationships for training. Just know that. I continue to work for that. I'd love to have your cooperation, but I will ask for that information for the record. I'm going to turn a little bit here to another question. Simple question, can you tell me, do you maintain records of the waste heat that is generated by your various nuclear power plants around the country, or could you obtain it for me, the ones that you regulate? If something's coming out of a big stack,
Yeah.
what is it? And how much is it?
I'd have to give you something for the record.
All right.
On that.
Very good. And finally, simple question, and I know I've overrun my time, Mr. Chairman. On Ukraine, does the NRC have any relationship or collaboration ongoing with instrumentalities inside the nation of Ukraine?
Yes, and I asked Commissioner Ostendorff to supplement my answer since he visited Ukraine last year. But we do have some bilateral arrangements with them, and we provide a cooperation and advice to them. And I know I'll pass it to Commissioner Ostendorff because he was there last year.
Thank you for the question. The answer to your question is yes, we do.
Okay.
And at several levels. We've had commissioner visits, various commissioners. Was the most recent one there in June of last year, working with their regulator, talking about the importance of an independent regulator with technical competence. We've had our security folks go over there to provide offers of assistance for security training. There's a video teleconference that occurred just this past fall between our senior staff and Ukrainian regulator staff to look at questions they have about trying to resume construction of the Kelmitsky plant about 4 hours west of Kiev, and how do we look at similar resumption of construction activities at our Watts Bar plant in Tennessee. And I think we have a very healthy dialogue going on right now. I know that we will, as a commission, will have meetings with their head regulator, Mr. Bochco, here in about 3 weeks when we have our annual regulatory information conference. He's coming to that in Rockville. So I think that relationship is very alive and robust.
I would ask for more specificity on that, either privately or for the record.
Certainly,
I'd be
we
very,
can
very
provide
interested
more
in that.
details.
I do have another question, Mr. Chairman, but I want to have you have the ability to rotate to other members.
Mr. Luskowski, if you'd like to go ahead and ask the other question, then I can wrap it up.
Okay, this is really my last question, and that concerns the continued storage of spent nuclear fuel. The Commission extended the length of time assumed to be safe for storage of spent fuel at reactor sites from 30 to 60 years. And I'm very interested in in your opinion as to how that will impact the safety and security of the public. It assumes that we can't find a storage site for this material.
Yes, ma'am. That decision that you refer to, it relates to an environmental review that we're required to do with respect to licensing. It is not a decision in favor of extended storage. What it says is that from an environmental standpoint, from a safety standpoint, it can be safely done. It can be safely done. That decision, I think, actually, it's, I think, in litigation here.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's in litigation here, and I think in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals.
If the challenger succeeds in their argument, do you believe the court should side with the challengers? And what would be the impact to the rule and, by extension, operating plans?
Well, I think the court should side with the agency on that. They're challenging our decision. I think the four of us are comfortable with the decision we made. It's hard for me to speculate what the court, if the court agreed, even in part, with the petitioners. It's hard for me to speculate what that would mean. They may remand it to the agency for further evaluation. They may issue some sort of an order. I wouldn't want to speculate too far because there's multiple things that the court could possibly do. But we are confident that we had reached an appropriate decision on the matter that was put before us. And again, I want to emphasize, it is not a decision that was intended to reach in effect, a license for interminable period of time, or to encourage that type of approach to ultimate treatment and handling of nuclear waste.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony today.
A couple of questions. One, what are your estimated carryover balances of this year, at the end of this year?
I believe at the end of this year, there is none from, we're not planning from fiscal 16, if I'm articulating this right. We plan to fully obligate for 16. We have some carryover from prior years. I believe the total is maybe about up to about 25 million, about 13 million fee-based. That's what I understand.
So this budget request doesn't assume the use of any of those funds in this budget request that you currently have, any of those carryover funds?
Yeah, if that's correct, it does not.
Okay. Secondly, on the rulemaking, and frankly, I'd like to commend the Commission for choosing to modify the NRC staff's proposal on rulemaking so that it fully reflects the direction we provided in the omnibus. Rulemaking is a significant authority under the law, and the Commission should assume the responsibility of that authority early in the process, as you all have mentioned you're starting to do in your testimony. Do you expect that we will receive the rulemaking plan no later than the March 15th deadline, and that it will reflect the requirements outlined in the omnibus?
Yes, I do expect you will get it by that date, and it will conform to the language, and it will be consistent with the language provided in the report.
The committee received a report in January that indicated that the Commission now has 43 proposed rules pending instead of 93. Can you please discuss what happened to change the number of the rules, and do you expect the number to be reduced further once the new rulemaking plan is implemented?
Actually, I've been talking to my colleagues of supplementing that report. The report that we gave you, I think, focused on what was expected to be worked on in fiscal 17. I think the number is higher. We're going to provide you a supplemental report. What we did not include in that report are some things like petitions for rulemaking and other things. So we need to get you some more up-to-date and better information about that. The other aspect, just to highlight one other, there are some things that if you look at what is technically a rulemaking activity in front of the agency, include some things that are sort of long suspended. There are no activities on it, but I think in the interest of full disclosure and transparency, we're going to give a supplement to that report.
Okay. Just a bizarre question. Maybe not that bizarre. There's only 4 of you here. Is there any challenge in not having a 5th member of the commission? Are decisions being postponed because there are splits of 2-2 or anything like that because we don't have a 5th commissioner that's been approved?
I haven't experienced, I think we've worked well together. I don't know of anything we've put off because we don't have a fifth commissioner.
As the longest-serving current member of the commission, I would note I've served on a commission of 4, a commission of 3, a commission of 5, coming back to 4 again. 5 works well, and Congress set us up at 5 for the kind of natural advantages you're talking about. It does help clarify outcomes. But I think actually the pace of doing the business before our agency, I have to say candidly, I'm extremely impressed with how effectively I think this group of 4, even with the disadvantage of maybe a 2-2, and that has occurred. I don't mean to indicate that that hasn't occurred since we went back down to 4. But there are ways we have of determining that outcome. Often it goes back to staff delegated authorities. So I would say that maybe not speaking to whether or not we get a 5th, but I think this 4 is gosh darn impressive.
Thank you. Ms. Capter, did you have one other thing you want?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate, if I might, to the chairman and the members, that based on what is happening in the marketplace with energy prices, I would urge you to consider developing an economic model that can anticipate the impact on given firms' economic performance based on what is happening in the energy markets and the likelihood that they would be less likely to invest because of what is happening, and to have a rating that you look at and you can identify out of the dozens of plants that are operating, because I have a concern that there's going to be cost cutting and a lot of things are going to have to be done that might impact safety. So I would just urge you to consider that suggestion. Thank you.
Let me just say in conclusion, thank you all for being here. And I'm not one who is frankly easily impressed, but I got to tell you in all honesty, I've been impressed by you all. The last year, I appreciate the fact that you've tried to follow the congressional direction or intent that we put into the language and tried to work with us on that. And frankly, I know of a lot of agencies in the federal government that could learn a lesson from the way that you've implemented this last budget and have been working with Congress. So I appreciate that very much. Now, I don't expect that you all agree on everything. If that were the case, 3 of you wouldn't be necessary. But it seems to me that you hash things out and try to come to a solution, and that when you come to a solution, you all say, okay, that's what we're going to do. And I appreciate that because, frankly, it restores the credibility that had been being deteriorated in previous years in the NRC. And the one thing that is very important with the NRC is your credibility. Not only what you do, but your credibility around not only this country, but around the world. So I appreciate the work that you do. I look forward to working with you as we implement this budget, as we continue on the progress with Project AIM and trying to right-size the agency. And I'm not, I say that as one who supported increases in the NRC budget over the years when we saw the nuclear renaissance coming, and we wanted to make sure that we had the personnel and everything and that we were ready to license these things and so forth and so on, and circumstances have changed. So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to recognize that and work with us to maintain the right size of the agency, and look forward to working with you and implementing this budget as we move forward. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.